Welcome, everybody, once again to Chronicles of Arcanis. I am joined today by one of the fans of Arcanis, Daniel Allen. So, Daniel was also one of these old school third edition 3.5 story arc or first year story arc, the Coryani Civil War. And I think this is again, I keep focusing on things that I see as paradigm concepts, PCI, really set the stage for a lot of what I see today after 15 years away. Is I see a lot of more major story arcs, like things that are, this is a major story arc. This is now published adventures. Whereas, I think my experience with the RPGA was very limited in the living arcane, well, the living Greyhawk, the living city, and those. I mostly did, the old school, uh, where you just come down, they throw you a PC and you play. Um, so what I saw was not only this amazing setting that took story seriously, that set the stage in year one, so that at the end of the story arc, if you had played the whole thing, you would be prepared. And I have to assume that the other campaigns in general did this, but the focus on the hard points and the soft points is the opportunity to fill in extra stories so you could learn about Arcanus. But that hard point aspect to me seemed fairly unique. And what I enjoyed about Arcanus from a DM's point of view, from someone who was interested in the story and the shades of gray, was how cosmopolitan, how there were so many different viewpoints, races, opportunities to play very, very varied, very, very varied types of characters from all types of backgrounds. And yet the plots pulled you in no matter what your background, whether you were part of a secret society, you may have received orders just because you were from Canceri, you may have received orders just because you are an Allori, and that really engaged players in a way that I didn't see anywhere else, and I don't know if that's how things have progressed. But what I have here is Daniel, and Daniel's going to tell us a bit about his experience with Arcanus. Tell us, how did you get into the hobby? How did you get into D&D? Who are you? Where are you? Why are you?
Well, who and where? Like you said, my name's Daniel. I am originally from the great state of Georgia. Lived all around the country for a while. Dad was in construction, chased jobs doing that. And my first exposure to Dungeons and Dragons was actually from my dad. We never actually got to play, but he had some stories about a character that he'd played in the 70s. Um, I didn't get started myself until high school. Fell in with a group of friends. They introduced me to the hobby, everything from Dungeons and Dragons to Shadowrun.
Mm-hmm.
And we played, and naturally, I think as most people's early experiences are, the experience it was total clown shoes. It was just what fun things can we do just to amuse ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't take it too seriously. I got introduced to Arcanis my first year of college by Jeff Meehan,
Mm-hmm.
who was actually one of the writers for Arcanis. The Jeff and Jeff mods usually set in Old Corian,
Yep, I
and
recall
he
that.
GM for us.
Wow, that's
We got a group. Yeah, we got a group together. That's where I met my wife. Um, Oddly enough, our characters started dating before we did. And it went from there. I got hooked fairly early. Jeff is a good GM. He's a good writer,
Mhm.
and he knew really how to use the module to hook you in.
Mhm.
Uh, and it just went from there. I started at the beginning of the year 2 of the original 6-year arc,
Okay.
and
So
we
tell us about
pretty
your
much
character.
went
What were you
straight
playing?
through to the end. We played. I played a Valvirden from Millendeer,
So
which is an
explain what that
odd
means.
which is an odd combination. Well, the Valvirden uh, in Arcanis, there are human families that long ago were touched by the divine and invested with a portion of a particular god's divine power. The Valvirden are the holy people of the god Nair, who is the god of flaming devastation, god of destruction, and warfare of a certain type. The indiscriminate battle aspect of warfare, sort of like Ares in Greek mythology,
Mhm.
as opposed to Athena in Greek mythology, who's more the goddess of tactics and intelligence applied to warfare. Nair is just the one that revels at battle. And Millendeer is a nation that was a former province of the Coryani Empire. They broke off some decades beforehand and had become more or less what you typically think of with D&D, the feudal system, kings and knights, and
So the kingdom of Millendeer is kind of based on this Middle European, so Bohemia, Poland, Lithuania,
mhm,
Eastern European, Romania, things like that. Yeah.
mhm. It's a
Water
very very distinct,
side.
yeah, very distinctly Germanic as opposed to more Western Europe,
Mhm.
much more Middle Europe. And he started off. Um, well, he was from the part of Millendeer called Lustia, which is kind of the backwater of the backwater. Borders the vast wood where the bulk of the Elori live. And once his mother died, there really wasn't anything keeping him there. So he did the typical adventurer thing of setting off to seek his fortune
Mhm.
because the future just is not in Lustia. And wound up for his initial adventure in Old Corian
Mm.
with the module Double Dueling. I don't have a lot of memory about the actual module or the storyline of it, but the final boss fight on that was fairly brutal for a group of first level adventurers, none of whom had the ability to see invisibility. So, and it went from there. He over time became a psychic warrior
Okay.
because Val are the only character who can use psionics, who can use
Mhm.
mental powers. And that appealed to me, so I went with that, and eventually branched into the prestige class Myrmidon,
Okay.
which is all about crushing your enemies.
Hmm.
You get extra attacks just basically for free, full movement while making attacks. If you happen to drop a foe, you can make another attack. It's
Hmm.
it's it's about cleaving. It's about
Right.
just crushing your way through foes.
Right. So
He became pretty good at that.
yeah, where did you end up then on the Coryani Civil War? What side of that conflict did you fall upon?
Our table wound up more or less on the side. Wound up on the side of the rebels.
Okay. And when did
Uh,
you guys make that decision? What happened that you said, no, we're not supporting the Empire?
well, we had gotten
Besides that you were from Millendeer, of course.
well, yes, our table had being run by Jeff Meehan.
Mhm.
A lot of our ties were in Old Corrigan. So we got to know that city particularly well. And by extension, we got to know Corian fairly well. And our ties typically ran towards those groups that would be rebels. We became acquainted with the patriarch for the Sian Valmayan. We had conversations with him, got to know him fairly well. And so we got to witness his execution at the hands of Calcestus. And we knew enough from, deep diving into areas that, some characters just won't go into, that this can't be what it looks like. It can't be this easy that a Valinor, an angel, shows up, declares this guy the savior of the world, has a bunch of people executed, and what really sold it for us was the fall of the God's Wall. The mountain range that the gods had put up in history to protect
from the demonic hordes, the time
to protect
of terror.
Arcanis from the hordes.
Yeah,
the hordes of the time of terror.
I want to just touch on something that you brought up a couple times. So sounds like you were pretty much home based out of Old Corian. So this is the Coryani Empire. The Old Corian is where the original capital city, and of course, over time, cities grow, capitals get larger, new palaces are made. And one of the early authors of some of the original books and text had written a source book specifically for this particular area, Old Corian. It became a living Arcanis playable, which was another interesting thing that I think Arcanis did very early that no one else had done yet, which was to put out a published module and then turn around and make that playable for the living campaign. And it was a very well developed little section. So it was like I live in Brooklyn. But not only do I live in Brooklyn, which is the oldest part of I live in Brooklyn, which is, the oldest part of the 5 boroughs, but I live in Bushwick, which is the oldest of the Brooklyn. And it shows it. It's like Old Corian, that it's neglected, that, the downtown, there's many air park slope, there's all these more affluent areas, and yet this is the neighborhood that made Brooklyn, right? So that's what Old Corian is like. And the people who live there have great pride that they're there. And so what happened was Jeff Meehan and Jeffrey Wittenhauer, they proposed to start writing adventures that were based primarily in Old Corian. And so there was this entire soft point story arc. There was all kinds of other interesting things happening. So again, this is one of those amazing places. I don't know what it was like to play in, all of the WotC side of living campaigns, but I didn't hear anything like that from the players in other campaigns, that they had this attachment to the setting. So that's still available. You can still buy the old, it's called the
Carnival of Swords.
Thank you. I knew it was swords.
Carnival of Swords by Scott Charlton.
There you go. So, these are, 20 some years old, and it's still an amazing adventure. And, if you're willing to do a little bit of work, you could port it into any setting, because it's just an awesome place to go.
It's a master class of world building.
Yeah. So that's actually the kinds of things that pulled me into Arcanis. I am, as a game master, I am a world builder. That is what I love the most. And when I see people saying, I don't need to spend blah, blah, I don't need to spend all this time. You shouldn't spend time developing. Like, look, this isn't good fun, bad fun. It is fun for me to build these in-depth, detailed, realistic verisimilitude, one of my favorite words, settings, even if it all doesn't get to be used because it's there. And if somebody else wants to use it, they can use it. And that's also what's amazing about all of these books from PCI, that they are filled with plot hooks, with all kinds of ideas to go on story arcs on your own. And I find that kind of setting the most engaging for me. There's no crunch in the Codex Arcanus. It's just stories. So, all right. So you start you're on the rebel side. Of course, the reason you chose, as we said, is not only basically the murder of the patriarch of the church, but also what can't help but be a sign that something terrible has occurred, because literally the wall of the gods, the manifestation of the pantheon, and Ilir, the head of the pantheon, his love for the Coryani people such that he raised a vast mountain range to protect the people from these hordes of demons and devils. That's a pretty big sign. So then what'd you guys do?
Well, we kind of went about our business, but as everybody was doing, we were wondering how is this going to play out, because this is a major change. This is a big left turn in the setting, and we had to kind of wait to see how that was going to play out a little bit, because even in a place with magical communication, it does take a little bit of time for word to get around. We got to wait and see what the various powers are how they're gonna react to all this. And one of the wonderful things that happened there was you would occasionally get little bits of writing about that kind of thing from Henry and company, from some of the guys that at PCI, who would basically, while all this is happening, here's what's going on, with the emperor. Here's what's going on with the king of Millendir. Here's how they're reacting to this. This is stuff your characters wouldn't necessarily know, but just to kind of keep you, the players, updated on what's going on. Here's a little bit of fiction that'll help with that. So, we were reading that, and we were, kind of figuring out what was going on. And we decided, more or less, what decided us was the fall of the God's Wall. We basically said, whatever form it's going to take, we are going to have to oppose Calcestus. We're going to have to oppose this emperor. Valinor or no, because we knew Valinor can fall. Valinor can turn from their purpose, and that might have been what happened here. What really solidified it was the Battle of Empibon, the first major conflict of the war. And how we happened to be in Empibon for the 2 or 3 mods that led up to the battle, and witnessed the decision. Basically, okay, he has decided ultimately to crush all opposition. He's taking the first move, and more than anything, we're heroes, and heroes defend people. And so we're going to defend Empibon, which is what's known as the Forge of the Empire. It's the city set up in the most iron and most metal-rich part of the country. And it's where most of the arms and armament for the Empire are made. It is a fairly grim place. And again, there's a lot of great world building that goes involved with that one. And
so just to interject here, so Empibon, as we've discussed in previous episodes, so the Pantheon's very different. So way back during the First Imperium, there was just the Pantheon, and everybody worshiped the Pantheon as a whole. As empires shatter, things change. We know from real world that syncretic things happen, that focus in a specific region just becomes on a specific god. And that's how things progressed in Arcanis. So every individual deity has its own church, And then when we were talking about the patriarch being murdered, the patriarch was this single holy figure that all the other heads of each church looked up to in a pope-like situation.
Mm-hmm.
But every single church has its own agenda, has its own leaders. And so the city of Entebben was is the city that is devoted to Beltane. Beltane is the goddess who is the spouse of Neroth, and together they rule all of the death, undeath, and the rebirth of humanity. And that is despite it being a dark, almost industrial, you kind of think of, England during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and the Victorian era with all the coal dust. And so that's kind of the general atmosphere, but at the same time, it's this incredibly holy place where the sacredness of the soul is held in high esteem. That this is the what Beltane does is when you die, if you are heroic, you go on to heaven, to the Elysium, whatever their high holy place is. Otherwise, you go back to the cauldron and you are stirred into the cauldron of all of life and souls, and then reconstituted with a new mix and thrown into reality. So this move so the emperor at this time was Calcestus. So
Mm-hmm.
the move by Calcestus to stomp onto Entebben, and as I recall, was this where they used the blast powder? How
Yes.
bingo. So take us through this battle.
Well, the goal for Calcestus was to claim the Forge of the Empire. Whoever controlled that would have the advantage in arms and armor, and would be able to get fresh supplies. So this was very strategically important, and it makes sense that it would be one of the first grounds of combat. The city was defended not just by living people, but by the shades of, I believe it was a Beltinian legion, who at some point in history uh, agreed to suffer an eternity of torment for the ability to defend the city from beyond the veil. They all sacrificed themselves and were all bound to their own skulls to serve as the guardians of the city. So the city is on every street corner. You'll have two or three skulls just hanging there from a building, painted with arcane magical symbols, and it really adds to the whole grimness of the setting. So there were initial assaults and attempts to burrow under the city, and it was a slog. It was grim going. It was very grim going. For battle interactives like this, you're given goals that help determine how the battle's going to go. If
And
you meet
time
your
limits
goal,
sometimes.
and time limits, you have this much time to make sure they don't do this,
Mm-hmm.
or the battle's going to go a certain way. And if too many people don't manage it, you're going to lose an advantage, which is what happened to us.
Wow.
Our goals were to prevent the enemy from tunneling under the city. We didn't get it done,
Mm.
and that affected the end of the battle. I'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, at
And
some
that's like, so
point,
actions have consequences. I see
I
this
think it
over and over
was
again about Arcanis, that actions have consequences, that
actions have consequences.
All of this is set up that way.
Absolutely. At a certain point in the battle, I think it was the Legion of the Watchful Hunter, a Cadite legion, the god of bards and music and assassins. They attempted to shadow jump the entire legion into the city. They wound up hitting the wards that protect the city and tore open a rift to the shadow dimension, spilling out hundreds of undead shadow creatures that attacked both sides. Actions have consequences. They got the breach sealed almost immediately, but that still left us with hundreds of creepy undead shadows to mop up. And the battle continued. The climax of the battle came when they set off a bomb, blast powder bomb, under the city. This was what we had been trying to prevent and had failed to do so. That bomb disturbed a nest of Ilhuan.
Wahahaha. So I was
The Il
DMing this. I mean, I'm just so you know, it was like all of these battle interactives as a game master are so much fun. I mean, this is that one time where the kid gloves come off, that you don't pull any punches, and you just get to really make it this is that back to the battles of war gaming, tabletop war gaming. This becomes very strategic, very important. And I had the shittiest character for that kind of stuff because he was a patrician. So I judged. That's all I would do. I would judge for battle interactives. I would never participate in it.
That's...
So there you are. Boom. And the people need to understand, if you're not familiar with Arcanis, I hope you're not, and you're getting more and more familiar. Blast powder. We haven't really dove too deep into that. This is a great opportunity to talk about blast powder. So among the pantheon, there is Elthers, the god of knowledge, and not just knowledge. So like we've talked about, these deities have all types of spheres of influence, and technology, innovation really is part of Althair's sphere.
And
And
artificing. We called him the god of stuff.
The god of stuff. Make stuff. And make stuff happen. So one of the miracles, one of the gifts of Althairs is this alchemical compound that we would call gunpowder today, except that it doesn't get wet. It doesn't get ruined in wet condition. So only the priests of Althairs and some of the Vals know how to make it. This is considered a sacred item, that it is through the divine knowledge of the god of Althairs that the world has been given this gift. And then what happened?
The Coryani loyalists used quite a lot of it in an attempt to bomb their way into the city. This disturbed a nest of what are called Ilhuan. Ilhuan are one of the races of beings that in history, the Alori, when they were still enslaved to the Sressen, committed genocide against, or so it was thought. In one of the year one modules, we find that the Ilhuan are still extant, and that they reproduce in a rather horrific manner. They boiled up from under the ground and began attacking both sides, and it was just horrific. These are large creatures insectile creatures with
They
multiple arms.
they look like Umber Hulks,
They look like Umber Hulks,
but they're
and they're
bionic.
psychic. They're not. They're psychic, and they're intelligent, and they're a hive mind.
Right.
And not only are they a hive mind, they're a hive life.
Oh,
You
right.
can't.
Oh, right. I forgot all about that. That was great. Yeah.
You cannot kill a single Ilhuan. You have to kill all of them in order to kill one of them.
Yep. That was it.
So in this battle
That's the
area,
last
attacks were
round.
your
That's the
friend.
last combat of the battle interactive. You've
Yes, it
expended
was.
so much of your resources by this point, and here's this thing that however many you are encountering, you must kill them all for the encounter to end, and it doesn't end until they all die simultaneously.
They had to. The judges had to keep track of how much damage their characters did per round.
Mm-hmm.
And had to give regular updates to the judges who were keeping tally on the pooled hit points of these.
Yep.
To survive this battle, all the tables collectively had to do 30,001 points of damage. If we did 30,001 points of damage, all the Ilhuan died. And like you said, you've been at this for a while. Not a lot left in the tank, abilities wise. Healing magic was at a premium.
Mm-hmm. And this is where, I've been, what I was saying the other day is that the rule of cool, dude, Arcanis was the rule of cool before there was any of this YouTube D&D stuff. I mean, what is more cool than that? Honestly, I mean, come on. Now you have groups of players who are in competition, and all of a sudden they must not only turn around and defeat a common enemy, but that enemy is so powerful that the battle will not end until there is a total amount of damage done by every table. That is cool.
Very. Of a room of about 200 players, there were perhaps 20 survivors.
Yep.
I was among them. Me and one other person at my table. Mm-hmm. Everyone else was torn up.
Now what happens next, as I recall, was probably a mistake. But
what had happened was, just as the Ilhuan were bursting through, and an Alori that no one had ever seen before made a statement and used some kind of ability and caused a mist to flood the streets and pathways of Empibin. This had no effect on the combat, but at the end of the combat, it was revealed that this mist was some sort of preservative. And so if you could get healing to the people who had fallen, they survived. So while nearly 90% of the participants fell in battle, pretty much nobody died from this.
Now, when I ran this event, and I don't remember if I was at Origins or Gen Con for it, which one I did, but it was the first time they ran it. Okay. And what they announced was this Alori shows up, 8-foot tall Lori or whatever she was. And and what they announced was, if you could get everybody who died, if you could get their character to the front table in X amount of, and all of a sudden there was this mass rush of people grabbing, and rushing out. And so that was a lesson learned.
Yep.
Lesson learned. Battle interactives are awesome. That the emotions are high, and we don't want to cause stampedes in this tight confinement. But again, it was part of that rule of
Mm-hmm.
right, because they knew this was like if they didn't have a solution for the fact that it was going to be, I mean, my iron TPK, that was a TPK, boom, got them all.
Mm-hmm.
They if it hadn't been for that, they knew that it would, destroy the campaign. So they came in with this understanding. They just didn't execute it. But moving forward, and that's what's about it, everything became very, very smooth. They really learned from that lesson. They took feedback because there were some folks who were, pretty traumatized because they thought they were going to lose their character and they weren't going to be able to get up to the thing in time because it was so and it was like, all right, first off, it's just a game. It's make believe. Let's stay calm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's just a game.
And there are still options.
Yeah. So so there we are. Yeah, that was an awesome battle interactive. I think that was a classic example of what is different about paradigm concepts. So did you make it through to the end of the story arc?
We did. We made it through to the end of the story arc. We participated in most of the major battles.
Mm-hmm.
Grand Corian, Solanus Moor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we were at the fall of Savona.
I was
Uh,
when Savona fell, I was no longer involved with the campaign.
mhm.
Tell me about the fall of Savona.
The Battle of Savona was. I think it was meant to show that the conflict itself was wrong. It was incredibly grim going, working through Savona. Savona is the holy city of Larissa, the seer of the gods, the one who can tell the future, and who was so horrified by the future that she saw that she dove into hedonism. Um, it's also a major port with a lot of material and goods running through it. So again, strategically important. And by this point, it was fairly clear that the war was being run by monsters. Dorjan Valmayan, both through actions taken in modules and in some of the fiction, was revealed to be an absolute psychopath, just a slavering monster who was perfectly happy to kill everybody that stood against the emperor. We're going to preserve the empire. It's almost like Robespierre. We're going to save the country if I have to kill every man, woman, and child to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought that into his battle tactics. And the more the battle went, the longer the battle went, the worse the weather got. I mean, the sky was already overcast. It was starting to rain. And it worked itself into nearly a hurricane centered on the city. It was affecting our battle tactics. You couldn't use arrows, they'd get blown off course. Spells had trouble being cast. It was almost like Curian, the god of storms, the god of war. It was almost like the gods were very against what was going on in this city.
The god of righteousness,
Um,
the god of just war.
just war. And I don't remember too many of the specifics of the battle.
That's the
Because
way it's
as I said,
supposed to be.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that the specifics of the battle were necessarily the point of this time of this one.
Yeah.
But at the end, we found that there was a nest of some kind related to the silence under the city. The silence being, I think, the ultimate villain of Arcanis,
Right.
which is
Violence is trying to just unmake.
reality. And there was something there in the Luna.
Hi, buddy.
That's my dog. There's someone outside, so naturally have to defend the home. So, Luna, come here. You be quiet, girl.
Oh,
You're fine. We're fine.
or that's what an editor's for.
Yeah. So there was some sort of type of silence-related thing under the city that was having some sort of an effect on the whole thing. Because once we destroyed it, the weather cleared almost immediately. The battle ended almost immediately. And everyone kind of looked around at each other and basically mutually agreed that this wasn't worth it, at least partially, because large swaths of the city were just ruined.
Yeah,
Larissa's holy city had been largely destroyed to no good purpose.
Savona is the way when Henry and I spent a lot of time actually talking about Savona a couple times, and really Savona in its essence, and when you think about what is this city like, so start with Venice, a city of canals, add New Orleans, and add Rio de Janeiro, and then throw in Pattaya Beach, Thailand. It is a party town. It is a religious party town. It is old money built upon mercantilism. And, it's where sailors come to party. It's a port call. It's a liberty port. As a Navy vet, I have a real soft spot. It's one of my favorite parts of the geography. I could always imagine all kinds of what this would be like, to be able to go to Savona, having traveled the world and experienced these other types of places. So that's what, and it's it's an important part of the Coryani heritage. Not only is Larissa this hedonistic, but as the seer, there are very serious people. Everybody isn't a party animal. So within Larissa's, that always makes me wonder what's the tension within the Larissan worship, right? Because there's got to be some old school Orthodox Larissans who, look like Hasids and, follow some real strict guidelines as compared to, the crazy hedonistic, let's drink and get it on.
Oh yeah, there absolutely is some tension there.
Yeah. All right. So boom, that was a pretty, so at this point, what happens? Is this where the rebels and the loyalists are beginning to say, wait a minute, maybe there's a bigger problem here that then leads us to something bigger? Or is there still this ongoing tension?
There's still a lot of ongoing tension. I was at one of the LARPs where the players, during the course of it, attempted to gather up as many favors as they could with as many important people as they could, and try to cash those in just to at least get like a ceasefire for a minute, just to say, okay, let's take stock here because something's going on under the surface. Something is definitely manipulating the situation. Can we take a look at this? And Henry, for I'm sure various reasons, ultimately didn't allow this. but that was kind of incorporated. There was kind of the sense of this kind of thing. You know, there's something going on toward this.
Mm-hmm.
You still had loyalists. We still had the rebels. But this was, I think, the turning point where everybody figured we have to bring this to an end. We can't keep doing the fighting. We've got to start planning our end games. We got to start throwing everything towards finishing this because something's under the surface. And because
Well,
I
what was
think
the end game?
Well, the end game was the Battle of Grand Corian. Was the taking of the Coryani capital, and the honestly, that was a big enough task. I don't know if anybody had any idea what we were actually going to do with Calcestus if we found him.
Well, was this a combined effort now of loyalists and rebels, or was this still?
We still had loyalists, shockingly enough.
Mm-hmm.
Henry mentioned at the end of the campaign that he was amazed there were loyalists at all. He thought
I've
he'd done a
talked to
really
one
good
actually.
job.
I've already interviewed one, and if I had played through, my character also would have been a loyalist till the end as a patrician. You know that just he was very, very dedicated.
But we were through some odd things that happened. We had some revelations about the nature of what was going on, and we got shown visions of the future in which the Silence had conquered Arcanis. And found about the nature of Queen Lisa, the nature of her brother, the shape-shifting Punjabi, the tiger people, and who had kind of been like a little bit of background flavor somewhere, somewhere there. We'd run across them a time or two. Yeah. We'd run across them a time or two, but nobody knew what they were or where they came from. And we had bigger fish to fry, so nobody really dug too deep.
Yeah. See, that's again part of that, pulling in. So the Swords of Light, the Gladius of Light, Skiz the Rat, and now the Punjabi. These are real small things that were planted in the first year that are really important come conclusion. And again, amazing story writing.
There were revelations about the curse of the Valtensen. We had to go to the afterlife to retrieve the soul of Menissus Valtensen, who was assassinated at the end of a module where we found out quite a bit about the nature of reality, honestly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we found that the prime mover of most of these events, at least as the Civil War was concerned, was the Pride of Alir. I don't remember the Valinor's name, honestly, but he had taken it into his head to essentially make Calcestus his puppet and rule Corian as he saw fit. And well, we can't have that because we saw what that leads to. That ultimately leads to the Silence consuming Arcanis. And so we've got to put a stop to that. And even with those revelations, coming back and telling that story to people, you sound like raving lunatics.
Right.
So, even telling the loyalists, no, we got taken by magic to the future and we've seen what happens.
Yes, of course you did.
Sure. Of course you did.
Would you like, I have this really nice room hosted by the Clerisy of Neroth. They just care for your mind. They'll make sure that you have no stress.
No stress at all.
And a special suit.
Yes.
So
keep you warm and comfortable.
Self hugs. So there you
Self hugs.
You're in Grand Corian. Of course, you're originally from Old Corian, so you probably have lots of ties, lots of opportunities to have some great role playing and some great connections. So this final battle will have a lot of personal connection. And again,
Old Corian runs by the river. The river runs through Old Corian. It's one of the reasons it was established there. And that was our entry point into the city.
So
was going
describe
through
this final
old
battle
Corian.
for us. Tell us how do things culminate? There is, there you are. Before you is what? The
We have
Pride
the
of
walls.
Valinar,
Yeah,
or the
we
Pride of
have
Valir, I
the
mean.
yep, the Pride of Alir. We have getting into the city, getting over the walls. We had Menissus Valtensen. We had there was nobody left in reserve. The rebels threw literally everything we had against this. And at this point, we're 20th level characters, so city walls don't mean a whole lot to us.
Mm-hmm.
We're breaking into the city, heading for the main temple of the Pantheon, battling through the city streets. It's tooth and nail. It's 6th and 7th level fireballs going off. It's a
Cats and
nightmare.
dogs
It's
living
an
together.
absolute nightmare. But the forward prog, yeah, the forward progress is fairly constant. It wasn't until they started getting clever that we started having problems. One particular instance, as we're trying to make our way into the Grand Cathedral, is that a group of assassins managed to utilize anti-magic field, which of course just completely nerfs a lot of your abilities, a lot of your armor, your weapons, whole thing there. My wife was a Stormlord of Hurrian. Straight Stormlord, 20th level Stormlord, holy champion of Hurrian, the god of storms, the reluctant warrior, the god of just and righteous battle. She used her turn to leave the anti-magic field and create water. This works because the water, once it's there, is non-magical.
Mm-hmm.
It's not affected. The same goes for her lightning.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
So we're on the floor. We're on the floor with the assassins, and she basically deep fried them.
Yep.
Create water, cast lightning bolts.
Love it.
Once the initial effect is gone, it's non-magical, so you're just standing in a puddle of water about a half-inch deep, and a bolt of lightning hits you.
Awesome.
Really messed up their day. Made that particular fight about half as long as it was going to be.
That's what the creativity.
That's what creativity's for.
What you're supposed to be doing. How do I overcome this barrier?
Mm-hmm. We all break into the cathedral. We find the Pride of Alir in all his Valinoric glory. You're literally fighting an archangel. And that was hard. Because he's got resistances and he's got abilities and he's got wings capable of creating hurricane force winds. And it was a slog. It was a very major slog. But the point was never to beat him. The point was to keep him busy while, what was his name? He was one of the Devil Princes. Had been around since year one. Loshnek.
Losknek. Yeah.
Losknek, who has been around for quite a while in the campaign.
From the very beginning.
Very beginning. I think Spear of the Logan, I think he made his first appearance.
Yep.
And the plan was, because if a Valinor dies, the god loses that aspect.
Right.
It happened to the Mercy of Neroth. That's why death has no mercy.
Right.
It happened to the Serenity of Beltane. It's why now there is no serenity in death.
Right.
And if Alir loses his pride, you can't imagine that's going to be a good thing. So the point was never to destroy Manitas. The point was never to destroy Manitas. The point was to keep him busy so that Losknek and company could create a space where he could be put safely away. We managed to do that with surprisingly few casualties, and with the help of Calcestus, who it turns out had been replaced by one of the Punjabi.
Oh. Hmm.
Right around the point of, I think it was one of the battle interactives I didn't get to participate in, but it was it's a port city that's run by the Alori. It's one of the only places where the Alori allow people and openly interact with them. I forget the name of the place at
Maris?
the moment.
I think it's
That's it.
Maris.
And that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah, Ceramus.
Ceramis.
Because it was at that battle that Calcestus actually took the field. And that was actually the last time anybody saw Calcestus before he was replaced, it turns out, because he had been informed while there of certain things that we had that players had been made aware of. And he said, okay, I'll look into that. And it was revealed later that he had gone back to talk to the Valinor that's become his patron and said, well, people have told me these things. I didn't know about these things. You didn't tell me about this. What's going on here? And Manitus said, well, that's unfortunate. You're going to the dungeon, and now this Punjabi is going to take place. And, we're going to, I can't have you asking questions like this, because then you're not going to do what I say. So, Calcestus was rescued from the dungeon, and he and Menissus were both killed in the encounter. And the two men made peace with each other in their last moments, which was rather touching. But ultimately, the plan succeeded. Manitus was kept from interfering long enough and was eventually sent to his own private pocket dimension.
Hooray!
Hooray! Now, who's the emperor?
And now who's the emperor?
Didn't have any children.
That's right.
Or siblings.
That's right.
And
that's the what? That takes us out of the end of the first year, the first story arc, or
the end of that. The end of it was actually a LARP held specially for those who chose to judge the last battle.
Oh, okay.
Those who GM'd at the last battle, because your characters didn't get to participate, you will get to decide the fate of the Empire.
Wow.
They had a special LARP just for these folks, sort of a kind of a convocation to determine who's going to be emperor. And there were several candidates. And I believe ultimately it was
step up.
I think one or two tried. One or two characters, I think, tried to step up and say, I'll be emperor. And I don't think anybody really took that too seriously.
Oh.
But the ultimate winners were Senator Tenson Balin.
Oh, wow.
Who has been
the very first adventure
since the very beginning.
Yep, the very first adventure. He was the patron of the
patron. Adventure. And they made him emperor. He wasn't particularly happy about it, which was, probably shows that he was a good choice.
Right.
And they also decided on the new head of the Mother Church, since Calcestus had that title as well.
Right.
And
they chose the
went with they chose
the young woman,
the Illyri, the daughter of and she had gotten the you had helped her get the in to shake the pillars of heaven part 2, where Felician was the previous patriarch was assassinated,
right,
to get the word of Illyr, the actual scrolls that the holy texts are based on. I suddenly can't remember her name.
Me either, but it's all right.
But they chose her, and I wasn't particularly happy about that, because having ties to old Corian, I knew about the basically the head of the Illyrite church there, who was another woman who was also a Valisante and an Illyrite, and who had Nobody was supposed to know this, but Henry occasionally talks sometimes. And she was actually the reincarnation of the original Valisante.
Oh, wow.
She got visions. She had a more
I
direct
knew she was
tie
special. I didn't
to the
know that for sure.
gods.
Very cool.
Very few people were privy to that information. And she really would have made a better choice because the Valisante in question, I can't remember her name. They made her the matriarch,
Mm-hmm.
and we had learned that she is not a fan of Larissa. She doesn't see much value in Larissa as a member of the Pantheon.
Wow. Well, that'll be
She
interesting.
doesn't. She doesn't see the oracular aspect. Partially
Well,
because
that's
it's not.
crazy because as I recall, the whole deal was that she gets caught up in this pillar and has a vision.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, there was that. But
All right.
certain
Well,
things later on showed that she was not a fan of the Larissan Church and had a little bit of a bias against them. But you know, I didn't run the last fight. I wasn't there.
yeah, yeah.
So
Well, this is
actions
awesome.
have consequences, and
Yep.
I'm sure
It
some of those
set us
play
up.
out.
My understanding is it's that those actions in that last LARP sets things up for the next story arc, and my
Mm-hmm.
understanding is actually the next two story arcs. But I'll get
There
more
was
into
a
that.
time jump.
Mm-hmm,
Was it
mm-hmm.
like a 60-year time jump?
I think it was
50 or
40.
60-year time jump. Might have
Uh,
been 40.
yeah, yeah,
Several decades, regardless.
yeah.
And I played through at least part of that one
Mm-hmm.
with a new character.
Okay.
And yeah, there was there's some leftover things that happened that tied back. So
All right. Well, what I'm going
yeah,
to do then is we'll continue to talk more about Arcanis as things progress. I've got lots of other people lined up to share their stories. I'm trying to wind us into a frenzy, get us all ready for Origins, which is the third week of June. And I'm encourage as many people to come to Origins to uh, look for the Arcanis games. They pop up all over the country in little tiny conventions everywhere. There could be one near you. And take an opportunity, read the codex and see what you think. So
mhm.
I really appreciate you telling us your adventure, your story, the whole character arc of showing up one day, leaving a little town of Lustia and becoming a major player, a big name, 20th level character.
Mm.
All right. All right. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your
Thanks
stories.
for having me.
All right. Have a good
All
weekend.
right, you too. I know.